Good evening and welcome to the first Cabinet meeting of 2024. Great to see everybody here tonight. Really pleased to be letting everybody know ahead of the formal agenda. All of the Cabinet will be making the pledge that we look at very carefully here. It's about making sure that we tackle loneliness and social isolation, something which this Cabinet takes very, very seriously. So we'll be signing that tonight. We'd encourage residents and organisations across Medway to make the pledge as well. And it's important we send that clear collective message that actually tackling those issues, and we saw that firsthand during the COVID crisis, is something that we all take very, very seriously. So I'm really proud that all 10 members of our Cabinet will be signing that tonight. I know CMT colleagues will be signing that as well. And we'll be making the message clear that we want Medway to stand up collectively to tackle that really challenging issue of social isolation. We'll move to the formal agenda at that point. Apologies for absence. I know Councillor Price is hoping to be with us later. He's delayed at the moment, but he hopefully will be here. Colleagues, happy for me to sign the record of decisions for the 19th of December? Thank you. Any disclosable pecuniary interests and other significant interests? Lauren?
So I'm a director, at least until it disbands at the end of March, of the South East Local Enterprise Partnership. So I'll be stepping out of the room for item number 7, and my colleague Councillor Curry will be moving that motion paper for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no other interests, which I don't think there are, let's move on to the first substantive item, and that's the provisional local government settlement. It feels as if every day of the week, every week of the year, we're rightfully looking at the issue of local government finance here in Medway. We know that the situation we inherited back in May was always going to be challenging. We're working closely, of course, as Cabinet colleagues will know, with both SITFA and Partners in Health, taking some external advice and guidance as to what comes next. But what's really important is, of course, what we'll be getting from central government. And this is, as the report rightfully says, is the kind of provisional settlement. So one of the things I'd encourage colleagues to recognise, and it makes it clear on 5.2, because I know some people in Medway like to focus on the issue of core spending power. We must remember, of course, that isn't necessarily additional, it isn't additional funding from central government. And the core spending power is what taxpayers of Medway are giving us to spend on their behalf. Something that we take very seriously. And I was on BBC Radio Kent in the run-up to Christmas on this particular issue, and to hear the finance lead, Peter Oakford, being so incensed with his own government just shows that actually the disappointment and frustration around local government finance is not a party political issue in the sense of whoever's running a council. All councils of all political persuasions feel badly let down by central government's approach. And colleagues have heard me say it, and I will say it again and again and again. We inherited a 91% cut in revenue support grant since 2010. And it's important to say that again in the context of this report, because of course that has an impact on our finances year on year. So we're doing the work that we've said at this council cabinet previously. We're working hard through the budget setting process for the February 29th full council, which will obviously be here in this room. The settlement doesn't do anything for us. In fact, it puts us in a weaker position, and we're not unique in that situation from a council perspective. Critically, and I'd urge colleagues, and I know they've looked through the papers very, very carefully, but as has been published earlier today, my friend Tracy will be raising the issue of the Household Support Fund at the upcoming full council meeting. The jiggery-pokery of Treasury when it comes to their language on this issue and its future is unacceptable. And so I do hope that we have cross-party consensus to send that message to say it's not too late when it comes to the budget from central government later in the spring. We want to see that extended because we know the impact it's had on our communities elsewhere. So the report is as read. It is, I say, the provisional settlement. Final details will come through in due course. And of course, we will take forward, importantly, our budget, our first budget under a Labour and Cooperative Administration on February the 29th, which this feeds into. I'll pause at that point, open the floor up to colleagues for questions or comments. Tris and Lauren.
Thank you very much, Vince. And of course, the evidence of the financial strain on councils has been growing. And this settlement, I'm afraid, as you've correctly said, does not provide enough funding to meet the severe cost and demand pressures, which have left councils of all political colours and types warning of the serious challenges they face to set balanced budgets next year. Councils in England, according to the LGA, continue to face a funding gap of £4 billion across this year and next. And that announcement, I'm afraid, even a shortfall on our predictions, does not meet the challenge in the funding gap facing all councils across the country. The government forecasts are based on the assumption that councils will raise council tax, and this leaves councils facing the tough choice about whether to increase bills in the desperately needed funding at a time when they are acutely aware of the significant burden that could place on some households. And that leaves many and all authorities in that position across the country. The new homes bonus makes up a considerable part of funding of some councils, particularly shire councils, as well as ourselves. Councils need clarity on the future of the new homes bonus to be able to plan their budgets beyond next year and into the medium term. Any changes should come with transitional funding to ensure that local authority services that residents rely on are not put at risk. The government should also, and they haven't, commit to the fair funding review, reviewing both the formulas and the underlying data used for the assessment of relative needs and resources, which have put Medway on a back foot. Transitional mechanisms attached to the outcome of the review should provide sufficient funding to ensure that no council experiences a loss of income, and there should also be transitional arrangements for any business rates as reset as well. So this is now the sixth one-year settlement in a row for councils, which continues to hamper financial planning over the medium term. Only with adequate long-term resources, certainty and freedoms can councils deliver the world-class local services for our communities, tackle the climate emergency, which is so important, and level up all parts of our country. And I'm afraid, once again, this government and this settlement is not where we need to be. And I hope over the next 12 months we can see a change in government and finally local government put in a firmer footing around medium-term position on finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Tris. Lauren?
Thank you, Vince. I think we all sort of knew that the provisional local government settlement would not be what we need, but it's quite galling to find out that it's 1.6 million less compared to the budget funding that we received last year. And I think that, you are seeing Tory councils, as you've mentioned, in Kent, complaining about their own government's lack of ability to fund them properly. So I think the situation is completely unsustainable. And as Councillor Osborne said, the only thing that's really probably going to change that is a new government which will deliver for us sustainable long-term funding of local government, which is sorely needed. I'd like to particularly point out how disappointed I am that there's nothing in the provisional local government settlement about the Household Support Fund. This is despite the cost of living issues continuing in a terrible way, which I think if Conservative government ministers were knocking on doors with the regularity that we are and speaking to voters, they would have an understanding that those cost of living crisis hasn't gone away and that funding is still very much needed. So as you said, hopefully they will reconsider their position. Certainly, evidence of its need is in the fact that £11 million has been given to Medway residents under that fund since it started in September 2021. And as I said, there's no sign that that need is going, and there's obviously a question about what will happen to those residents who are struggling if the government isn't going to reverse its position and continue that much needed funding. So quite a depressing picture, but obviously a lot of challenges that I know we can deal with.
Thank you very much indeed, Lauren. Teresa?
Yes, thank you. And echoing what everyone else has said, Vince, and particularly, Lauren, what you've said about the household fund yet. We are yet to see the bite of Liz Truss crashing the economy. There are people every day who have been on fixed-rate mortgages since that happened, who will have to come off them, and then, only then, will they see the effect of this cost of living crisis in the raw. And in the context that we're already seeing different groups of people, fully working households with mortgages, coming onto the homelessness register because of the issues that they've encountered with their rent going up when landlords have passed on mortgage increases to them. This is only the cusp, so it's absolutely the wrong time to pull the rug out from under people's feet. And I think we've got to do as much lobbying as possible to prevent that happening. And I think Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, had a very disingenuous way of talking about this, saying it'll be there next year. Whether he means that he's actually going to put it firmly into the budget and give people the ability that we need, as Tristan has said, to actually plan for something instead of lurching from one year to the next without knowing what's coming is in the lap. I wanted to talk quickly, particularly about social care. There's absolute consensus amongst all of the professional bodies, the Association of Directors of Social Services, the Local Government Association, and many other people, that social care is woefully underfunded. Indeed, we're carrying a nearly £9 million overspend here, with officers working every single day to see how we can manage that gap. This is about the most vulnerable people in our community, about how we look after them, young, old, those who are disabled, elderly people, sick people, people coming out of hospital. There's no recognition in this settlement that any of those demands are happening. We're focusing on a moving target every single week here as people come into the care system. And I think it is incredibly very lacking in compassion and very short-sighted not to have tried to address that in this settlement when that consensus is there for everybody to see. But I am confident that the work that we're doing here with all of our council officers and all of our partners in the voluntary sector and in health too, that we will be able to overcome some of these challenges. But it is not without an enormous amount of stress, worry and fear for those people who are waiting for those services. And for that, I'm very regretful indeed.
Thank you very much, Teresa. I can't see any other colleagues at this stage, so I want to thank everybody for their comments. And you're right, you know, collectively, the pressures you've raised, the support that's been there previously, which is not there at the moment, and I hope government listen carefully to the debate we'll have next Wednesday and to the debate other councils up and down the country are having as well, because that is such a critical set of circumstances that those families across Medway have found themselves in. And let's compare and contrast. You know, within 100 days, this administration brought forward our cost of living plan. In that same financial year, it looks as if the household support fund is going. We're not all the same. So we will get on with the work that we've been doing, and I thank every cabinet member, and Richard, I thank your corporate management team as well. These are difficult conversations, and the report that we're noting tonight doesn't help, frankly. On that basis, are colleagues happy to note the report? Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item then. Zoe, over to you on the Macmillan Welfare Benefit Service.
Thank you. Really pleased to be proposing this motion, which is to support the expansion of the current highly successful welfare benefit services for people with cancer, which has supported sufferers for over 10 years now. The service needs additional capacity, and by expanding it into West and North Kent will create greater resilience within the service for Medway residents as well, with access to benefits for cancer sufferers. Macmillan have approached Medway to expand the service to these areas, which will in turn enhance service for Medway residents suffering from cancer. And Macmillan will fully fund the service to the residents of Medway, West and North Kent, which will increase the resilience of the service through economies of scale. Staff pay awards have increased over time, which have cost the council some £24,000 as a contribution towards the costs. And Macmillan have agreed to cover this shortfall and fully fund 4.5 full-time equivalent additional staff. There are estimated 4,900 people living with cancer across the extended provision area. And Medway has one of the highest cancer survival rates, especially lung cancer. And Medway residents will benefit from the enhancements to this service, so I'd like to move this.
Thank you very much indeed, Zoe. Teresa?
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. And I think actually it's a great tribute to you and your teams that Macmillan have seen how effective they can be and asked us to expand the service. And I think particularly, I'm looking at paragraph 4.5 in the paper that tells us that those affected by cancer consistently say that money worries are second only to the anxiety caused by their diagnosis. So anything that we can do to take the pressure off families, to help them navigate the very complicated situation with benefits that actually, in a rather vindictive way, has been made much more difficult in the last few years, I think is very welcome. So I'm pleased about this, and I think our own debt teams at the council, as well as the help that we can get from the voluntary sector, there's an opportunity to work together here to make sure that everybody knows that this service exists, that there is support available, and that there's a preparedness to go to where people are, including, you know, when they're in treatment, when they're actually in the centre, and to work with families as well. So I'm really pleased that this has happened.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Just before I come back to you, Zoe, to sum up the item, certainly I think back at one point, the previous administration were considering getting rid of the service at one point. That point didn't last very long, I have to say, and that's in part because it has always been an outstanding service. And actually, it's a testament, as both you and Teresa have said, Zoe, that actually Macmillan have come to us, you know, proactively come to us. And that just shows the confidence they have on those individuals who are out there delivering day in, day out to those individuals and families. And it's worth stating as well, it's not just the individuals with the diagnosis, it's a wider family who they support through this as well. Those conversations happen, you know, on a daily basis. So the fact that we're able to support more, and as you said in your opening remarks, Zoe, what that does is not only mean more people are getting a brilliant service, but it solidifies and secures the service for Medway residents. So I'm really pleased we're seeing this come forward. I pay tribute to those individuals who are out there doing this work. Cancer is a scary thing. It's a horrible thing. It's an evil thing. It's something which impacts on so many of us in so many different ways. And we know the statistic, 1 in 2 individuals will be impacted by it. And we know actually, as 4.4 says, that for some types of cancer, our community is above where it should be nationally. And there's a lot more work to be done. Some of that is historic because of actually the place that shut down 40 years ago. Those impacts of things like mesothelioma are still in our community today. So again, having Macmillan there, you know, the trusted organisation that they are, working with our trusted organisation at a time when those families need them the most. So I'm very, very pleased to support this. Zoe, back to you.
Just to add, Vince, that this is absolutely a win-win proposal for us because it's being fully funded by Macmillan, and we're very grateful for the offer to be put to us to extend this service and to enhance the service for the people of Medway as well as for the additional areas in Kent.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Another really important agenda item coming up next. Nashaba, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. And I just want to say that I'm actually really pleased to bringing this report forward. I say that because despite some of the challenges that it highlights, this is about us as a council taking a strategic look at how we deliver housing, how we support those who are in need, and how we look at the challenges that we face when it comes to homelessness, and ensuring that people have a roof over their head, which I know that other cabinet members agree with me should be a fundamental right, and it has impacts on so many other aspects of your life. So I think this report is really important because it shows the forward thinking that we have within this council, and I just wanted to highlight that before I start to talk in a little bit more detail about what the recommendations are. So, and I think the other important thing just to be mindful of is that obviously when it comes to looking at how we deliver our temporary accommodation, how we sort of deal with some of the challenges around homelessness, this isn't necessarily a new thing. We have been looking at this for quite some time as a council. However, the challenges are increasing. And we have seen in recent months that homelessness is once again on the rise. And by that, I mean not only those people that are sleeping rough on our streets, but also people who have been in secure tenancies that are suddenly finding that they are no longer able to afford them, or those have been, the landlords have asked them to leave and they no longer have the ability to stay in the property that they might have been in for many, many years. And those are huge challenges that we're seeing. We're not the only authority to see this. This is a national problem. It is actually something that national government also need to look at. But at local authority level, we have to look at ways to tackle that. And essentially, this is what the report is setting out, is our overarching approach to some of the challenges we're currently seeing when it comes to homelessness, and specifically how we manage the temporary accommodation pressures. So, to highlight, obviously the recommendations are under one, but I just want to pick out and set out with a little bit more detail 3 of those. So the first is that Cabinet is requested to recommend Council to agree to add just over 41 million, almost 42 million, so 41,925,000 to the capital programme, funded by prudential borrowing for the purchasing of approximately 150 homes, which will be used for temporary accommodation. And just to provide some context to this, in January 23, Council were presented with a paper which was the very initial pilot that allowed us to do this, and that was for the purchase of 20 units. So we have looked at this in some detail, and having seen how that's worked, this is to expand that scheme further following the pilot that had cross-party support back in January 23. Cabinet is also requested to agree to take on 150 leases of properties in the private sector for use in temporary accommodation, with delegated authority in terms of how we facilitate that. And then finally, it's also important to highlight under the recommendations a request to agree the setup of an internal lettings agency department to take on properties to prevent homelessness and the associated costs. And we've approximated that the associated costs will be 153,000, with 137,000 just over in ongoing annual costs in order to deliver that. One of the things that the purchasing and leasing will do and enable us to do is start to alleviate the reliance that we've currently got in the private rented sector. And I'm sure colleagues will be aware that the private rented sector at the moment is pretty volatile, and it's pretty expensive as well in order for us to be able to house Medway's families there. So it's not giving us necessarily the security we need. And so part of the recommendations in this report is to start to look at that from a council perspective about how can we provide that level of security and strategic thinking when it comes to the delivery of temporary accommodation. And just to give you a little bit of context around that, our temporary accommodation needs have increased quite significantly, so approximately about 30% since the end of 22, beginning of 23. We previously had approximately 362 to 365 families in temporary accommodation, and we're currently, our most current figures are showing that number at 480. So that's Medway families, many of whom will have children who do not have that secure property over their heads. And as I say, we're not the only local authority facing these challenges. There are others, but what we have seen is that because inflation costs, because of increases in the cost of living, that this is becoming a really significant challenge, and one that we do need national government support on, as well as doing things that we've mentioned locally. And the graph at 4.5 will show you some of those increases if people would like to have a look. So not only is this about finding some of those solutions, but the letting agency part of this is something that I'm really excited to bring forward, having a department that can help us to start to look at the prevention side of how we make sure people have secure housing. And what it will enable us to do is that properties from the private sector can be signed up to the agency for property management and to let householders to let to households as part of a prevention, so that we support people before they fall through the net. And I think that's one of the key things that will enable us to do, as well as facilitate some of the changes that we're suggesting. There is a combination of recommendations here, which I would put forward as set out in the report to Cabinet. I'd really welcome Cabinet support on this tonight, because, as I say, it is a really fundamental report when it comes to challenging some of the longer-term issues that we have when it comes to the housing crisis in Medway.
Thank you very much indeed, Nashara. I've got Simon, Tracy, Teresa. Simon, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Vincent. Thank you to my colleague, Councillor Khan, for this. It's an absolutely fundamentally important piece of work. I think this is going to have implications for Medway's residents for decades to come. It is really groundbreaking stuff here, I think. One of the things that we don't sort of tackle well is looking at the causes of homelessness. I had a meeting just this morning with some residents in Luton about how domestic violence can lead to housing, homelessness and issues around it. And so there are all sorts of reasons for it, as well as the cost of living crisis and the rent increases, which we've already reflected on at this meeting. So this is a hugely important piece of work. The idea that you put people into accommodation and then help them with their issues after they've got something, the housing first approach, that's what's driving this as well. And as I say, the causes of it. So then the fundamental bit about working with communities as well, the idea, and paragraph 1.4 of the report, which talks about the internal lettings department taking things on, so important an element of the whole process. So I would really like to congratulate Councillor Khan and the council teams who've been working on this so hard to make it happen. It's a really important piece of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. Tracy.
Thank you. I think this is really welcome. As Teresa mentioned earlier, the impact of the economy crash is still being felt and will carry on being felt by many. So increasing mortgages, increasing rents, I think this is a problem that's only going to get worse in the longer term. So I think that this initiative gives us greater resilience and greater capacity to make sure that we're able to stop people falling into crisis and actually meet their needs at the time when they need it. It will reduce our reliance on the private rented sector, which will be helpful in terms of finances, but also because we will have greater oversight over the quality of the homes that we're offering and making sure that people who become homeless are offered better quality accommodation for them to live in. So it will lead to reduced budget pressures for us, it will lead to better outcomes for our residents and make sure that we're able to be carrying on meeting their needs into the future. So thank you very much for bringing this.
Thank you, Tracy. Teresa?
Yes, thank you to Nashaba and to the teams. I think this is, as Simon has said, and echoing what Tracy has said, a bold step and a step that needs taking. It will help prevent exploitation and it will give our housing team some comfort that when somebody actually comes to the council for help, we will be able to help them. It will take some time to bed in, of course, and we've got to be mindful of that. But I think being able to offer those three elements of service in the future is going to really change things, and hopefully it will send a message to the private sector, as we are trying to do with our licensing pilot scheme, that we don't want to alienate them. We want to work in partnership with them towards better and decent standards for people in Medway, and fair rent, absolutely. This has also got the potential to turn an income. If we handle it right, it will actually cut costs in the end. And I think Simon, based on what you said about domestic violence, for example, being a cause of homelessness, it will give us much greater ability to work across our services more quickly to find solutions for families who find themselves displaced for lots of reasons. So if you like, it will cut out some of the kind of middle work when we're trying to help people with all of our partners in the voluntary sector and across the council. So I'm really pleased about this, and I'll be looking forward to seeing the properties purchased and getting up and running as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Teresa. Before I come back to you, Nashaba, oh, sorry, Harinder, did you indicate, please?
Yeah, just to say, so I used to see this, you know, regularly. I used to see people's whole lives being turned upside down when you lose your house, when you don't have anywhere to go, when you don't have, you know, your a home, and it really does sort of rock it breaks up families completely. Now, not to make a cold calculation about sort of what we have in front of us, but just to think about the number of people that this will affect and the impact that will have on every single family. This is likely to be probably one of the most significant things that we would have debated and passed if passed. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to necessarily get the recognition and sort of the type of public look-in as some other items might do. But this is certainly, I think, this is one of the more important, one of the most impactful sort of things that we'll sort of talk about in these chambers. So just from myself, I just want to say how impactful this will be. And it's just a shame that not many people will sort of notice it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harinder. If they're watching tonight, hopefully they're absolutely noticing it. I'll take Tristan next.
Yes, thank you. And I also welcome this item from Councillor Khan. I think one of the big debates actually happening locally, I think, around housing is actually, are we supporting Medway residents around their housing needs? And specifically actually around the homeless, given other debates that have been happening around provision in Rochester and elsewhere. And actually, I think this report centres this administration's view that we absolutely 100% know that there is a problem not created by us. The homelessness challenge has always existed, but it has manifestly worsened because of the economic position of the government has placed us in. But we are challenging this head on, and we absolutely want to send that message out that if you are a Medway resident and a Medway resident who's ended up falling on hard times, we are here to support you, and we will do that in a way which is financially cogent and will ensure our finances are sustainable going forward. And I think this, as my colleague here, Councillor Mahila, suggested, this actually is a big ticket item. We are sending a message about how we think our residents should be treated, that we want to bring in-house the capacity to support all of those who end up in these very unfortunate situations, many of whom will not go public or speak loudly about it because of perhaps the sort of feelings they might have about their situation, however they've got there. But we want to make sure that our residents are given that support, and given the context of a national picture where there is an ever-increasing number of people moving into this situation, and a private market which I'm afraid has been quite predatory around some of its behaviours, due in part because of government legislation on permitted development and other things, I think it's a necessary step. So I think it is absolutely important that we say loud and clear that this administration and this council is there for Medway residents when needed to support them in their moment of deep need. And I'm really proud to say, that many of these houses will be top standard. We will maintain those, and we will support those residents with all of our other multifaceted services in housing, I'm certain. And I just want to make that clear, given some of the debates that have been happening, that that London people are taking up stock, etc. That actually, this is about Medway residents and our support of our homelessness need here, and this is a bold message. So I'm very keen to support this. Thank you for tabling it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I come back to Nashaba, just a couple of comments from me. So local government talks about the challenging 4 areas. As a unitary authority, we've got all 4 of those, and I think it's fair to say that for lots of good reasons, the other 3, SEND, adult care and children's care, have had a lot of focus. This report brings that focus to that 4th one, which of course for our colleagues in Kent County Council is not an issue, but for our district and borough neighbours across the county and across the country, this is absolutely a massive challenge for them. And of course it's worth remembering that we don't have to have had this report. We could have not done this report, but this is an absolute priority for us as an administration, and I know personally for you, Nashaba, you've worked tirelessly on this, actually from when we were in opposition, and the fact this has come forward in our first year is no surprise to me at all. And actually, even if you had zero compassion, even if you didn't care about people, and this administration cares, we are compassionate, but actually, from a pounds and pence perspective, it makes sense as well over the long term. But actually, the money, although it's important, is not as important as the people of Medway. And it's right to say, actually, the impact of housing goes across every other portfolio. It's one of those issues which is truly organisation cutting. It goes through every element. If you've got poor accommodation, if you're in a B&B, your education is going to be, not where it needs to be. Your ability to take leisure, get some sport and activity, that just gets wiped out. This will have such a huge positive impact on those individuals who are finding themselves in this circumstance. And as Teresa rightfully said earlier on, because of the Truss experiment, we're finding people who have never been in the system before. So I hope, as Tristan says, those who are looking on will see, actually, we take this, not just our statutory duty, we go above and above and above and beyond. This will change lives for the better. And I'm really proud to be part of the Cabinet that will be voting on this tonight. Nashaba, back to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, colleagues, for your support. I think, as others have said, this is a bold move, but I think it's absolutely the right one. And just to pick up on a couple of the comments that have been made, firstly, on the types of people that are finding themselves facing homelessness, it's really interesting because people who have never faced homelessness before are now at risk of it. And we've seen that in the recent stats that have been published, more people in work who are facing homelessness, and an increasing number of young people as well who are facing homelessness. So there is a change, a demographic change in the people who may be in a position where they might not have a roof over their head. And let's be clear, homelessness has been on the increase since 2010, and that is because of the decisions that have been taken by our government. But sadly, that has worsened, certainly worsened in the last 18 months. The other thing that I want to say is this is one piece of the part of the puzzle. There is a whole lot of intervention that is needed in this arena and a lot of work that is happening across the piece because, as many people will know, the housing sector is really complex when it comes to this, and there are lots of parts of this that we are looking at as an authority, and this is one of those pieces which is looking at specifically around temporary accommodation. We are doing still a lot of work with rough sleeping, for instance, and people who do find themselves in that very, very vulnerable position of having to sleep on the streets. There's a lot of work that's happened there as well. But specifically here tonight, this report, it's bold. It is about prevention as well as looking at solutions, as well as looking in the long term. But I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. And I welcome colleagues' comments on it. But it is about that wider piece, about how we view the future of housing, how we view Medway residents in terms of their, with reference to their rights and what they should be able to access, and how we want them to be able to have the support that they need through the council. So thank you again for the comments, and I look forward to this being put through as a report that we can then put into action.
Thank you very much indeed, Nashaba. Are the recommendations agreed? Agreed, thank you. We're going to let Lauren have a moment's peace away from the table. We will move then on to the next agenda item, which, due to the declared interest, it will actually go to Simon, who's going to move this forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Vince. And just to give a bit of background to this report, this is about the South East Regional Local Economic Partnership that we've been part of since 2011. Medway Council has benefited hugely from this. About £40 million worth of investment in our capital programmes has come through the South East LEP since 2011. So it's been an immense benefit to us over those years. However, last year on the 4th of August, the government confirmed that the functions of LEPs would be delivered by the upper tier governments, including ourselves and Kent in the South East region. So what we're doing now is looking for the council, the cabinet, to confirm that they're happy to take this on and agree the transitional period that's about to take place. The CELEP, the South East Regional LEP, will cease functioning in March this year, and there are 4 recommendations that we're asked to consider. The first is the transfer of the relevant South East Local Enterprise Partnership responsibilities to Medway Council from April 2024, including business representation, strategic economic planning, and the delivery of government programmes where directed. Secondly, the joint Kent and Medway LEP integration plan, which will and then thirdly, to delegate authority to the Director of Place in Medway in consultation with the portfolio holder for economic and social regeneration and inward investment to take the relevant actions that are needed, including and not limited to finalising the terms of and entering into required contracts or other legal agreements as necessary to implement the decisions. And fourthly, to delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the portfolio holder and the Chief Operating Officer for expenditure of existing LEP funds, including but not limited to the Growing Places Fund, to be awarded by CELEP. Accountability Board, to be awarded by the CELEP Accountability Board, excuse me, in line with expectations for economic growth purposes, local businesses and local priorities, existing resourcing funding still to be determined by CELEP, and any future funding for LEP activities to be determined by the government. So we're asked to confirm that we're happy with those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Any member? I think before I go back to Simon, and I can't see anyone indicating, actually, it's helpful that this item follows on from the last item in the sense of a portfolio holder who was doing the job before May the 4th. You know, Lauren's ability to get out there and be talking to particularly small businesses, that's really important to Medway, has been critical, and that work's continued, as we say, after May the 4th. I was, as leader of the opposition, I have always been clear that I think CELEP was too big, actually, but that wasn't my decision. So actually, I think the ability to have a greater focus on that area, which is particularly relevant to us in Medway, and the relationship between us and Kent is positive. I think some of the work we've seen, and obviously the report we brought to the previous cabinet around the business fund, again, where perhaps previous administrations and portfolio holders were a bit arm's length, Lauren's got on and literally rolled up her sleeves and got onto the job to make sure that we're getting the very best deal for our businesses, small, medium and large. And this will aid us in that process as we move forward, of course, working closely with Adam as our director, who has a bit of knowledge of CELEP as well. Any other colleague? No. Simon, back to you for any closing remarks.
Yep, thanks very much. I just think, just to reflect briefly on what this actually means for Medway, I think the important thing is that since May last year, Lauren in particular, along with the rest of our cabinet colleagues, we've been taking on the sort of role of getting out there, talking to business and trying to bring as much investment into our towns and into our countryside areas as we possibly can. And that falls within my own portfolio, which covers strategic regeneration and fits in with the work that we've been doing to produce a local plan by 2025 as well. So there's a huge amount of important work that CELEP has achieved for us over the last few years, and now we have the responsibility alongside Kent of taking that forward, and I think we've got the right team in place to do that job. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. The recommendations agreed? Thank you. I think Toby may have gone to bring Lauren back. We'll just pause for a second. Hopefully Nishaba's going to go, and that means we can't do the next item because Nishaba's moving the next item. This is a good opportunity because I may have forgot to mention earlier on that the loneliness, if viewers to the cabinet meeting wanted to look at the information that we talked about at the start of the meeting, the website for that is www.medway.gov.uk/loneliness hub. So again, a good opportunity for residents, and I'm looking forward with my 9 colleagues to signing the loneliness pledge. We'll be doing that at the end of the meeting tonight. And now Lauren isn't lonely. That's quite right. We're tackling loneliness one person at a time. Thank you. Let's then move on to the next item, which is important project updates. Nishaba, over to you.
Good job we didn't all disappear. So I'm really pleased to bring forward this report, which again is a really important part of the wider programme for Medway that this administration is looking at. And I wanted to just set out obviously today I'm here to provide a bit of an update on what is happening with the Pentagon Shopping Centre and also Debenhams. And this is really about that wider delivery of the two quite very key sites as part of our strategic regeneration programme for Chatham. So very important sites, and I know that there is a lot of interest in terms of how these will be brought forward in the future and what our proposals will be. So I think it would be really helpful just to run through the recommendations that are set out in the report, so for absolute clarity. As stated at 1.1, Cabinet is asked to instruct officers to review a potential change of approach to deliver the redevelopment of the Debenhams Building by repaying the capital development cost with future revenue income, as opposed to only reviewing options for repayment via future capital receipts. Then at 1.2, Cabinet is asked to recommend to full council additions to the capital programme of £2,752,000 for the delivery of the Healthy Living Centre in the Pentagon Centre. And I think it's really important to note that this figure will be reimbursed by the NHS and is subject to NHS final approvals and Section 106 contributions. Cabinet is also asked to approve the wirement of £869,250 in relation to the Wilkinson unit from the existing Pentagon Centre Future Works budget to deliver the diversification of the first floor of the Pentagon Centre. And then finally, at 1.4, Cabinet is asked to recommend to full council the following wirements from the existing Pentagon Centre Future Works budget to deliver the diversification of the first floor of the Pentagon Centre. So as set out at A and B, A to deliver the Healthy Living Centre and B to deliver the Innovation Hub. Just to unpick those recommendations in a little bit more detail, firstly, with Debenhams, the reason for the recommendations set out in the paper today are about giving us the flexibility to explore different options for Debenhams in order to bring that site forward. It's a key strategic site, as I set out at the beginning, and this ability, the flexibility this will provide by being able to change our position from capital receipts to revenue income will give us the ability to look at different options for what could be possible at Debenhams. So that's the reason why that's there. With reference to the Pentagon, it's obviously been widely noted that we are looking at the Healthy Living Centre on the first floor. We're really keen to unlock that, and we've been working very closely with the NHS in order to do so. There are some additional costs that are associated with that, and that's what's been set out in the report. However, as the report also notes, that that will only come forward once we have the agreement of the NHS, and that will be reimbursed by them through the methods set out in the paper. And then finally, we've looked at the wirements that are required, and those are largely set out there for reporting clarity so that we're very clear in terms of our budgeting processes. So those are the recommendations I'd like to put forward to Cabinet. As I say, these are two very strategic key sites in an area that we're keen to bring forward as part of our wider regeneration programme, and this will give us the flexibility in order to do that in line with our wider vision for Chatham.
Thank you very much indeed, Nashaba. I've got Teresa, Lauren, Simon, Tris.
Yeah, thank you, Nashab. This is a very exciting project with huge implications for strengthening what we can offer from the health community and from our partners in an area where we know we've got a lot of people who have got poor physical and mental health. So I'm really pleased it's happening, and being able to have a sort of transformative approach to the upper floor of the Pentagon is going to make a real difference, because it means that people will be, we'll have small business people who are lone workers interacting with our health community, with people who are coming along for help and support. And I hope that there's going to be a lot of symbiosis and positive exchanges between those groups of people. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I'm pleased that we're working with our health partners. I hope that they're listening tonight to hear us approve that, and I look forward to lots of visible and actually less visible advances that these initiatives will make, including, of course, to the success and viability of the businesses in the Pentagon now, who should benefit as well.
Thank you very much. Lauren?
Thank you, Vince. Like others, I'm really excited about the work that we're doing in this this part of Medway. While some politicians, most notably the MP for Rochester and Strood, would like to bulldoze the Pentagon and turn it into housing, I'm really pleased that we as a council are fully committed to delivering the Healthy Living Centre. It's going to make a really big difference to people's experiences of the health service locally, which we know is already under strain. And it's also going to help our high street in Chatham to survive, you know, and to thrive. We know that they do really well when there's diverse services for people to access, when there's diverse shops. So it's really going to help drive footfall to the area and, like Teresa mentioned, you know, create a really nice sense of community in the first floor of the Pentagon, which will be fantastic to see. The paper also touches a little bit on the Innovation Hub, which is going to be a really vibrant co-working space on the first floor of the Pentagon. And I'm really excited and hope to be able to share some of the images of what that will look like shortly, because it looks like it's going to be fantastic, and we'll be supporting our local small business community to share ideas and to just, you know, get out of the house for those who are home workers and be able to have a really good office environment and also obviously you know, buy things on our high street, which will benefit local businesses. And I'm really pleased as well to be able to say that on Friday at the CELEP Accountability Board, we secured £300,000 for the Innovation Centre, an extra pot of money so that we can expand the space and make it even bigger and even better. So really, really pleased, and I'd like to thank the officers in particular who you know, helped me get that over the line. It's not always easy when you're doing things on a kind of Kent and Medway basis, but we were really successful in getting that project to the top of the list of projects that we wanted to support as a Kent and Medway economic partnership. So it's a really big win for us. There was a lot of hard work, so it's really a really good win, and you know, will mean that that will be a really big success, that project.
Thank you very much indeed, Lauren. That statement at the end there, justifying what you didn't hear when I was talking about you when you weren't in the room, which is very helpful. Simon, next.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for this report. It's a significant piece of work, and thanks to the officers as well who put so much time and energy into this. I mean, we're aware of how much our town centres have suffered over the last many years now, really. All of them have gone through a very difficult time, and I think this work represents a significant investment in the centre of Chatham, making a big difference to the way the high street will look going forward. It makes the NHS services much more accessible for so many people, but as I say, it brings about a really big improvement, as my colleague Councillor Edwards was just saying about the viability of the high streets and making improvements. And I think just one final point in that respect is about the look of the place. The public realm spaces will be greatly improved in front of both of these buildings as a result of this, which makes it a much more attractive and more sort of community-friendly space for people to gather and to enjoy themselves. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tris.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm also very pleased to support this. And I think many people here will be aware of this administration's commitment. You know, millions of pounds are being invested in Chatham as we speak to make it a better place for people to live, work and visit, and now to visit their doctor. Indeed, much needed, given the fact that our GP to patient ratio is extremely high. So this is a much needed health centre that will cater for the needs of some very vulnerable communities, and the location is absolutely ideal in terms of transport connectivity and co-links with other businesses. Residents will be aware at the moment Chatham Design Code has been consulted upon. There's been a long conversation there. We're spending millions on upgrading the paddocks, as Simon has indicated. That area holistically will see some real improvements to sort of greenery and sustainability. St John's Church, just nearby, is also seeing significant improvements to ensure events and classes. And as has been mentioned, the Pentagon Centre, the bottom floor for the Innovation Hub, where shared desks and meeting rooms and events can take place. All of this is being worked through in conjunction with some of the Medway Development Company schemes around Garrison Point, Chatham waterfront. So you can, I think the public can get a sense here that there is a whole collection of projects which are coming on stream side by side to each other, which will fundamentally change Chatham in the next 5 to 10 years to make it a better place. And this centre will be absolutely needed with the increased number of residences and people living in situ. And I'm hopeful that actually this will see some concurrent benefits around perhaps leisure, private leisure, as well as public leisure, some restaurant culture perhaps coming through as well. And I think what this says is that there is a bold statement that actually, whilst initially, if we were in opposition, we did have concerns about the purchase. I think in terms of the sustainability of it as a shopping centre, I think as a holistic centre now, which has access to residents around NHS, but also some of the services linking to housing and support for people. I think that there is a future for this site, and it is disappointing that members of Parliament are saying just take the bulldozer to particular sites, especially when conversations are happening around this type of provision. That sort of commentary was deeply unhelpful and should have been challenged robustly by other members of Parliament in Medway as well, and sadly that didn't happen. So I want to welcome this report. It shows we have a commitment to Chatham, and actually as looking forward, other high streets as well will hear that message and see what's happening in Chatham, and can be relied on the fact that we're seeking to improve all our high streets to the same standard over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thanks, Tris. Before I go back to Nashaba, I think that this, as others have said, the choice, again, when you're out on the doorstep and people say you're all the same, well, actually, the choice is very clear. Do you want a team that's going to let the Pentagon become rubble, or do you want a team in this administration who are going to deliver outstanding health provision and brilliant innovation space, recognising that actually, particularly in the post-COVID world, where a place like Medway has got that, balance of people who will commute a couple of days a week but want a good space to work in when they're in Medway, and again those small and micro businesses who want that ability to co-produce and collaborate, cooperate, some would say. The fact that this administration is delivering that through the recommendations we're taking tonight just shows to me that actually we're absolutely on the right page on this. It was right, those years back on the issue of the Pentagon Centre. I do regret that actually the previous administration failed to take forward getting the right amounts of professional quotes for the valuation at that time. But that was the history. Actually going forward, we're looking carefully at all levels of procurement to make sure we will be doing that, making sure we look after taxpayers' funding as well as the brilliant provisions that we will be delivering through this scheme. And Tris, you're right to say, of course, this is where we are now, but rest assured, those other 4 town centres, the town centres board, the next meeting of that will have a strong focus on Gillingham. We absolutely recognise that there are 5 town centres, they all need support, and this administration will do all that we can, even in these challenging financial times, to work with partners, to work with external funders and others to deliver that for our communities across Medway. Nashaba, back to you.
Thank you, and again, thank you, colleagues, for your comments. And I think when we, as others have mentioned, we've been talking about the proposals either here as an administration or while we were in opposition for quite some time now. And I feel that this report is a real milestone in terms of the next stage of this project. And specifically around the Pentagon, the unlocking of that top floor will be key. And of course, I talked about the Healthy Living Centre in my introduction, but it's actually about that wider programme about future-proofing our town centres and somewhere like the Pentagon, so that we can start to provide services which go beyond retail, because that dynamic is changing in high streets now. And actually this is about saying we are looking at how we can make our town centres fit for the future. and how we can meet the needs of our residents, and again, how we can show that partnership working, because as you say, Vince, you can't operate in silos anymore. You've got to be able to work with the different partners that we've got, whether that be across health or business or wider. So this is really, really important, and I appreciate that we've got some figures in here that need to be looked at, but actually the wider programme about what we're talking about is unlocking these two sites, both at Debenhams and at the Pentagon, to be able to start delivering for the residents of Medway.
Thank you very much. Are those recommendations agreed? Brilliant. Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 9. Nashaba, back to you.
Thank you. So another exciting report. All my reports have been very exciting today. So this report specifically looks at the Brownfield Land Release Fund, which many will be aware that we were awarded as a council in order to bring forward strategic sites across Medway. Really, really important funding. 1.7 million of that was ring-fenced as part of the One Public Estates Brownfield Release Fund grant that we received for enabling works at the former Strood Civic site for residential delivery of a minimum of 171 residential units. Now, those of you who know the Strood Civic Centre site, it is a very challenging site in terms of delivery, and it is one that we are working very closely with MDC to deliver. So what the report is allowing us to do is allowing for a direct award of that 1.7 million from the Brownfield Release Fund to be made to MDC in order for them to be able to begin those enabling works and bring that site forward as part of a wider programme of delivery. And that's what we've asked Cabinet to put forward today. So very happy to take any comments on that. But again, this is one of those strategic sites that we're very keen to deliver against, as I've talked about already in other reports, and it is about that wider programme that we have for Medway.
Brilliant. Thank you. Simon, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Nisha, for this report as well. Just to reflect on the fact that I'm one of the few people probably who actually used to work at the old Civic Centre site in another life, so I do remember it quite well. And it used to flood as well quite regularly when the high tides were coming in and the high tides were there. So it's been, obviously the land raising has been done now, so it's not going to that's not going to happen. And it's a fantastic project. It's a very exciting project, but it's also a very challenging project, as Nashaba said, because of the prominence of the site. It's right next to our lovely bridge. It's opposite the castle and the cathedral. We have to get this right in terms of design and how it looks from both sides of the river. But I think also, going back to our previous item, this is a significant investment in Strood Town Centre and brings the economy there a huge boost as well for the High Street area and for the community around there. So that from all sorts of angles, this is a really exciting project and something that's to be welcomed. And it also helps provide housing, which is much needed, including affordable housing, which is good to see for those people who need it. And this is an investment in the town centre. The design is key, and I'm very excited to see. And one thing about the design I'd love to see is a riverside walk lined with trees. So that'd be nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Before I come back to you, Nashaba, of course, very, very happy to support this. The whole point of this fund is to do what this will be doing, opening up those public estate brownfield sites, which should be, not just an empty space. And I'd encourage all residents, and I know everybody would, the consultation through MDC. It's not Medway Council consultation, but MDC are currently consulting on their vision for that site. So I think actually that's open until the 31st of January. So I would encourage everybody, if you want trees there, if you agree with Simon, make sure you have your say on that as well. But no, really, really positive. And again, working closely with our solely owned companies, and I think that's important. They're there for a reason, and actually this gives us that flexibility to do what we're proposing tonight. So very happy to support that. Nashaba, back to you.
Thank you. Not much further to add other than just to reiterate that, of course, there are huge challenges with sites like this. So this funding is really important in terms of how we unlock and create those opportunities, as Simon has mentioned, and as yourself as well, Vince, have just referenced. And I think, again, reiterating that point around the consultation, we do really want to be working with the wider public when we bring forward any type of regeneration, any schemes, because really this is about how does that interact with our towns more widely, but also what works for residents here in Medway. So please do feedback. This money is here to enable us to unlock the site. This does not mean that we have decided how that will be delivered in its entirety. So I just want to give that clarity.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that clarity. Colleagues, happy with the recommendations? Thank you very much. We'll move on to the final two items. Reminder to colleagues, there are, although they're not blue, of course, anymore on our screen, but there are confidential papers. I'd urge colleagues to avoid straying into that if we can for the two debates that we'll have next. Let's move on to the next item, and Teresa, it's over to you.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, everybody, including everyone in our procurement department, all of the officers who have worked on this critical contract award, the Support to Live at Home service. Just a reminder that this contract is worth £50 million. It's about looking after the most vulnerable people in our community in the long term. It includes services for extra care, that is where people live in apartments, where there's care on site all of the time, the residential long-term care of the future, because it does as much as possible to maintain people's independence, and then all of the services wrapped together that keep people in their homes for longer, maintaining their independence, and where necessary, if something happens to them, helping them to re-able and come back to a situation where they can be as independent as possible if they've had an accident, or indeed if they suffer from a long-term condition or become ill in any way. So a huge amount of work has gone into this. We need these services to be as efficient as possible, and that's absolutely been part of the procurement. We need them to be as high quality as possible, because this is about people's lives and making them as absolutely good as they can. And we need the providers who are in the exempt report to join with us in all of our efforts to prevent people becoming ill. So all of the work that we're doing in public health and all of the work that we're doing with our health partners is related to this, because we want the providers who have won the contract to join with us, to make sure that their staff and everybody that they work with, including the families of the people that are being taken care of, are fully signed up to that prevention agenda and keeping people as independent as long as possible as we would all want to be. So a lot of work has gone in. There is more work to be done. This is a group of people, a network of people that we keep in touch with. The contracts are carefully monitored to make sure that they meet standards, to anticipate problems, to keep people up with new developments, particularly, of course, in assistive technology, something that we're really working hard to bring into this arena so that we can have a modern and innovative approach to the way that we look after people. But the contract's going to be awarded. Absolutely, it's a critical part of all of the work we do in caring for people in Medway. So I'm pleased to propose it to Cabinet tonight.
Thank you very much. Any colleagues? Tracy, please.
I think it's so important that for our residents to live independently, we provide the best possible support that we can. It's really important for our residents to be able to live independently when they want to, for all sorts of reasons. But we need to choose the best possible providers for this really important service, with the focus rightly being on the high quality care and meeting the needs of the individual. This approach offers a much more flexible way of approaching this, and I was pleased to see, for example, that instead of being offered, say, a carer who will come between 8 and 8:30 each morning, that they get a basket of hours which can be more flexibly allocated across the week, and so help meet those individual needs, because I think this is a real difficulty when people are trying to live independently and being supported, that they have to fit a more rigid timetable, and this should help to address this. So I think this approach, offering a much more flexible way of working, more easily tailored to individual needs, will lead to better outcomes for our residents, and I'm really pleased to see this moving forward, so thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tracy. If there's no other colleagues, we'll go back to Teresa, please.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tracy, and that's absolutely right. You know, it's about having a modern approach, and that's where technology can help us as well. It will never replace that important human contact that we get through all of the people who work in the caring industry, but it will help those who work in the caring industry make better use of their time and ensure that the time that they do spend with the people they're looking after is quality time. So there's a lot in this, and a lot of developments along the way that I hope to see change. But yes, absolutely, you know, who wants somebody to come into your house and tell you what time you've got to go to bed? You know, that's not a future that I want for people. And I think we're lucky in Medway, actually. Our home care providers are good providers. Although the sector is challenged in many ways, like everybody, actually it's holding up well. And I think one of the reasons for that is because they do get good support from our officers and, of course, are hugely valued by lots of families in Medway who work very closely with them. So I'm pleased, you know, I wish the new providers, they don't need luck because they have come into this with their eyes open, but I do wish them very well, and I look forward to continuing to see the work that they do as we go along the way.
Thank you, Teresa. Is that agreed? Thank you. Let's move on to the last substantive item tonight. Again, Teresa, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. An already mentioned, Simon, but by you as important, a new duty now for us to do this, and this strategy takes into mind lots of new legislation tackling violence against women and girls, the Domestic Abuse Act of 2021, the Victims in Prisons Bill of 2023, and the Women's Health Strategy, important for 2022. So it's a new statutory duty. I'm very pleased that we've been able to award this contract tonight. And again, this is a contract that enables us to work across our services, picking up where people are at risk of abuse, picking up where they have been abused, giving women, and it is mainly women, but not exclusively, ways out of those abusive situations so that they can continue to live a good life and rebuild their lives where they've been victims of domestic violence. And really importantly, you know, breaking that intergenerational cycle that sometimes happens when children are witnesses to domestic violence, you know, and working with our education partners on trauma-informed counselling and support and therapeutic work to make sure that children who've been witnesses to domestic violence don't either become perpetrators themselves, because I'm afraid there is evidence to suggest that, but can cope with what's happened and be helped to move on. So a really important contract award, lots of partners in the voluntary sector to help and to work with. And I think, you know, officers, again, involved in the procurement of the contract have really taken on these new responsibilities that actually attract cross-party support from everybody, and I look forward to making sure that domestic violence, where it exists, is treated properly and people are given a chance. And again, we've got to think about what we do in terms of preventing people from becoming victims, so making them feel strong and safeguarded and able to speak out, and indeed for the future to work with perpetrators to change things. And that particularly means working with partners within the justice sector and the family courts. So there's a huge area here that this contract touches, and I think that hopefully under a new government, because I know there are lots of plans under a Labour government to expand this work and to put more resource into the partners, including the police, that will see a real change. Because very sadly, in the last few years, and particularly during COVID, domestic violence has been on the rise. And that's not something any of us want to see. So I'm grateful for everyone's support.
Thank you, Teresa. Any colleague on that? Simon, please.
Yeah, just thank you. Just to talk in support of this item in particular, just draw colleagues' attention to paragraph 324 about how the multi-agency response is so crucial within that. I don't need to talk too much about the detail of it. You've heard from Teresa how important this service is, but I think it's the way that we can work across all our agencies to provide, and as I mentioned this morning, the meeting I had was in relation to school and how the impact it has on the children and how schools can respond. That's part of that multi-agency response. And also just reminded about the pledge and isolation. People who are suffering from any kind of abuse are isolated often, and having this pledge tonight is key to that as well. So just thank Teresa for this item and for the officers, all the work that's gone into that. It's a really challenging and difficult piece of work, but it's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Is any other colleague wish to comment on this before I go back to Teresa? I think I'd say a couple of pieces to this. Firstly, if we think back to the item on temporary accommodation, there will be people who will be using that service because they're using this service. So I think it's about that joined-up council approach, that one Medway approach, which this clearly ties into. And as a proud white ribbon ambassador, you know, I want to see, we've got statutory duties, but we would be doing this anyway. Let's be really, really explicitly clear on this. So this is, again, something which the council, I know, takes seriously, and I know Teresa takes a personal interest in making sure that this tender and the process that we've gone through has been robust and is delivering for those victims who need the very best at those most challenging times. So, Teresa, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Vince, and I think that's absolutely right. We've got to play our part in making this statutory duty real, and that includes, I think, work with schools to educate and think about the behaviour of young men towards young women, to think about coercive control as well as those more direct forms of abuse, and to get to a position where everybody understands that it's not acceptable. It's easy for people to slip into coercive control, actually, and not even know that they're doing it. And we're seeing, actually, sadly, lots of evidence about that in schools. So within our statutory duties, there's a real need to reach out to everybody who can make a difference to preventing this kind of behaviour and to creating that safe environment for victims to speak out is absolutely crucial. So I'm really pleased to have everyone's support. And, you know, Simon, it's good to know that as a man you can go into a school and talk about those things, because that role modelling, as you said, Vince, with the White Ribbon ambassadors is critical as well. You know, making sure that it isn't behind closed doors, that we do know about it and we do want to change things. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Teresa. The recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. That closes the formal meeting tonight. Thank you, everybody.